But the Egyptian thing was very serious because after the slave trade, it was assumed that black people were basically inferior. They had been conquered, their worlds had been shattered, their empires had disintegrated. European diseases descended like the plague on Africa in some places, like in Tanzania. Europeans introduced rinderpest, not deliberately, of course, but that disease killed 5.5 million head of cattle in one area. As a result, the people died because the cattle was central to them. We have found areas in Tanzania where we found Africans were smelting steel 1,500 to 2,000 years ago. Steel! In the middle of the Iron Age, and machines superior to the European machines achieving temperatures of 1,850 degrees centigrade, whereas Europe never achieved such temperatures until the end of the 19th century. The Africans were doing it in the 5th. And these machines were able to produce a fine bloom of carbon steel in a single-stage process, whereas even in the middle of the 19th century, Europe had to produce it in 2 crude stages. The sintering of solid particles before they could reach the final stage of fine carbon steel. They have found astronomical observatories in Africa, in Kenya, going back to 300 years before Christ. They have found breakthroughs in medical science in Africa. They found Africans using aspirin hundreds of years before us. The Bantu people using Salix capensis, which yields salicylic acid. They found the Africans using tetracycline as an antibiotic 14 centuries ago, when we only started to use it in the 1950s. It's found in Nubia, in the bones of Africans. The lowest incidence of infectious disease in an ancient population where tetracycline was found. They found Africans who had developed eye cataract surgery at a time when nobody was performing eye cataract surgery. They found Africans invented the first drug to treat hypertension and psychotic disorder, reserpine. The Africans produced the most effective drug to deal with diarrhea, which we now call cowpectin. We don't even know where it came from. They found Africans had invented the vaccine long before Jenner, that the smallpox vaccine, a specific and complex vaccine, had actually come into America through the slave Onesimus. Cotton Mather, his slave master, reported upon it. They found that one of the most effective things in the early treatment of eye diseases, physostigmine, was created by Africans, and that in this country, African Americans synthesized physostigmine, which we're using for certain eye diseases. We don't even know about that. Even our Coca-Cola comes from the cola nut drink, the most famous drink in Africa, which is now the most famous drink in the world. It has a little more fizz in it. The Coca-Cola company only learned recently that it had something to do with the Africans, just as the most famous cartoon character, that the first thing that hits you in the morning, Bugs Bunny, that's not a white bunny or a gray bunny, that was a black bunny. It comes the butter rabbit stories that came out of the Bantu in Africa that traveled with the slaves into the South. Picked up by Joel Chandler Harris and then changed by Walt Disney. And then whereas the animal, the major animal whom the rabbit outwits in Africa becomes Elmer Fudd. You can't even see it, it changes. There it is and there it's not. So much of our heritage has been borrowed and transformed by other peoples and claimed to be their own.